So first off, the government would like to thank you all for donating your $321 billion to fund the new project of fighter aircrafts called the F-35 Lightning II. It's a super advanced jet fighter that has so much technology that it takes out a warehouse just to carry all the electronic components that are on board. So, with that being said, let me give you a brief history of aerial warfare. And in case you aren't familiar with jets, this is an M61 Vulcan, 20mm Vulcan cannon. Pretty much a really big machine gun. Shoots a bullet. These bullets are about the size of a $1 bill. So, just to give you some reference. And this is the F-35 Lightning II. And these are all different types of missiles and bombs that it can carry on board. Okay, so just so we can, a little terminology. I've always been interested in jets, love jets. If you've ever been to San Diego and you've seen the Blue Angels, they fly an F-18 Hornet, which is a variation of this jet. Looks similar, but it's very different. So here is the first step. Okay, so jets can be broken down into 5 generations. Each generation represents a breakthrough in technology and just how we classify it, how the U.S. Air Force and all other Air Forces classify jets. First generation jet was from 1945 to I said 1955, but it's just the mid-1950s. These jets were introduced at the end of World War II and continued to be used into the Korean War. Oh, I'm sorry, but topic of my speech is to highlight the major changes in jets from World War II to now. So, as you can see, the F-86 Sabre, this jet was extremely revolutionary in that it was the best jet of World War II. Most planes in World War II were propeller planes. They just had the propeller on the front, but this was the first generation of jets that actually include jet propulsion. So the major improvement on the F-86 was that it actually used jet propulsion, where most planes were just propellers. Second generation of jets were used in the Korean War and also translated and moved into the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was special and different in that it was the first real test of what jet were capable of in aerial combat and in warfare and the advancements that they had. The F-104 Starfighter was much faster than its predecessor, the F-86 Sabre, which had a maximum speed of 688 miles per hour. The F-86 Sabre, the F-104 Starfighter, was able to reach 1450. This was a huge advantage in that it was able to cover a lot more ground and avoid getting shot down as much. The greatest improvement in these jets were that this jet in particular was that it was able to carry a much heavier payload. So it was able to carry much more way bigger bomb, and the cost went up a lot. But this generation of jets was very important because it had used the first generation radar. It was only a range-only radar, which means it could only it had a very limited range of what it could see. It had infrared missiles. Infrared missiles are different than what you would consider a standard missile in what we use today, which are guided missiles. From the F-104 Starfighter, we come to the F-4 Phantom II, which was used, what year was that? It was used after the Vietnam War. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the war that it was used, but these generation of jets were used. The greatest thing about these were that they had increased pulse radar, which is actual being able to see and acquire targets out of range, out of eyesight for the pilots. So the pilots were able to shoot at what they couldn't see. These planes featured a look-down, shoot-down method, which was great because they were much more accurate. They didn't destroy as many targets that they didn't intend to, as like other bombs would. And this jet was great. This generation of jets, because most jets switched over to a multi-purpose use, which meant that they could use that they can go from from fighter jets to attack jets. Attack jets are used to shoot at ground targets and combat targets, whereas a fighter jet is used to fight other aircrafts in the sky. AF-18 Hornet, this is what the Blue Angels use. These planes are incredibly technologically advanced from their predecessor. And the cool thing about these is that their payload was dramatically increased. These planes could carry up to 16,000 pounds in bombs and missiles. If Generation 4 focused much more on maneuverability in the sky as opposed to speed. The greatest increase was from Generation 1 to Generation 2 on increase in speed. But from Generation 4, they focused more on maneuverability and being able to protect their pilots, because you're not doing much if you're just going fast in a straight line. Generation 4.5, it's 4.5, not 5, because it's a much less intensive dramatical change in the technology. So the technology, 4.5 are just really beefed up Generation 4 planes. The AF-18 Hornet has a ton of advancements, but the Super Hornet just totally blows it out of the water in that it's 25% bigger, has 33% fuel capacity increase. And then let's see that. Oh, and they also developed stealth technology, which stealth technology just means that the material on the plane absorbs the radar waves, so it's not as detectable on radar. The F-35B Lightning II, this is an extremely expensive plane. And when I was doing the research, it said $112 million, but I was reading it this morning, and it was showing that it could be upwards of $160 million per plane by the time they're done. The reason that they invented this plane was that they were saying it was going to be cost efficient, but at $112 million, it's a very relative term. So, in conclusion, Generation 1, the biggest improvement was in jet propulsion. They switched over from propeller planes to jets, to a jet engine. Generation 2, well, they switched from a piston engine that powered the propeller to a jet propulsion. Generation 2, the swept wings, they used the wings were, instead of going straight, they're at an angle to increase speed of the plane. And they had radar and infrared missiles. Generation 3, supersonic speed. They were able to exceed climb ceilings of upwards of 100,000 feet, and that's absolutely incredible. But that was only on few certain planes. Generation 4 is a pulse Doppler radar, which is just advanced radar being able to see what you can't, or shoot what you can't see. Generation 4.5, which is the 4 Plus, is just a really beefed up version of the Generation 4, but not exactly Generation 5. Generation 5 is, these are completely stealth planes that just are extremely expensive but extremely undetectable and preserve a lot of life. And thank you for your time.
You just close it, that's fine.
Okay, close.
Yeah. All right, Baruch, what did you think? Speak up, because we got to hear you on the camera.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Too much information.
Would you care to elaborate? When you say it was pretty good?
I liked how it was detailed and he took steps and he had a conclusion overview.
Okay. Do you like the visuals?
Yeah, I like the movie.
Okay. Large enough for you to see?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Okay. How was his delivery?
Good. I like how he looked at the audience.
Okay.
I can add on that.
No, it's okay. It's his evaluation, you know, so. Okay, well, if that's as far as you're gonna go, that's fine, thank you. I'm not gonna disagree with most of what you said. I thought things were fine. I do have some things that I liked and some things that I think you need to work on a little bit. The attention device is fine. I think that the idea that we're spending a lot of money on this and that we're paying for it ought to motivate people to listen a little bit more. You did have a little bit of a problem getting to the purpose statement. You almost got into the speech. You were already into your first point when you said, well, let me tell you what the purpose of the speech is. However, you did leave out the preview of what you were going to talk about also. So now it was pretty easy to figure out as you were going through it what the structure is. So in the long run, that doesn't turn out to be a big problem, but that's not always the case. And so you want to make sure that you're putting the preview up at the beginning of the speech. You've got a lot of information in the presentation. A lot of it is detailed technical information, which is great. I didn't hear a source citation. So I know the information came from someplace. I know you didn't just make stuff up. It's not like, oh, I'll just pretend these pictures existed and I'll just invent this idea. But you want to attribute a little bit. You know, some of the information is so detailed that you could probably just get away with putting a list or a source citation on some of the slides, but I do think that you need to say, for instance, that if you discovered this reading a book about the history of fighter jets or something like that, you could cite that, you know, also. So you could have the Department of Defense specifications on the slide, for instance, but then tell us the book that you read said this was a big innovation between those things. It's, you know, it doubled the speed, or it made it more maneuverable, or it could increase its capacity, or any of those sorts of things. I'm sure that all those judgments came from someplace, not just you, and so you need to tell us where they came from. I think since it's kind of an historical thing, it's a chronological development, that makes perfect sense. You go through the generations, and you've got a slide for each one of those points, which makes it easy to follow. There's a clear, you know, we've moved from one point to the next. I think sometimes the language needs to be a little bit smoother when you're going from one point to the next. I think you're trying to let the slides move us around a bit more, and it would probably be better if you made that effort more. So, like I said, you don't just become dependent on the pictures. And there were a couple of spots, by the way, on the visuals where it seemed like we were zipping back and forth between the pictures. Yeah. And that got a little confusing. If you had to go back for a comparison maybe once, that's probably okay. But it seemed to me like it happened 2 or 3 times that we went forward and then back and then forward and then back. And I know that you're trying to do a contrast, for instance. That might have been one of those places where instead of having all the detailed stats on one slide for that plane and detailed slides on one stat for the other plane, you could show the slide of the picture of the plane, slide of the next plane, and then you could have a table chart, for instance, that would show the comparisons between those things, make it a little bit simpler if you're going to do those comparisons. I think that that would have helped. Right at the end, I could tell that you were trying to summarize the speech with that last information, remind us what was different about each generation. Needs to be a little tighter because I think you're trying to cover too much on each of those points. Okay. And the slide really is probably not necessary. The font is a little small, and I think you could probably just skip that and remind us, you know, that the first generation of jets increased the speed of the planes, and the second generation doubled the speed on that, and then finally we had to start worrying about maneuverability, capacity, and technology, and those are the things that you're really talking about. So you can summarize it that way instead of trying to get to each, and then we went from this to this and this to this and this to this, because it sounds kind of like you're going through the speech again at the end. And I'd agree the delivery was pretty solid. Look, you do a good job talking to us for the most part, and so that's what we want. We want you to speak to us. Thank you.